All right, Rabbi, say good morning. Let us begin. Incredible. Shechianu v'kimanu v'giyanu that we are about to B'Shah Tova Mitzlachas begin our last daf in Maseches Yoma. Let us begin by thanking our sponsors, our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Tammuz, Adam and Yudit Benzev, for dedicating all the shiurim and drashos this month in honor of their children, Jake Sarina and Rosie. Our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Ira and Miriam Grossman, in commemoration of the yahrzeit of Ira's mother, Frida Grossman, Frida Bas Shmuel Zichron Livracha. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Neshama will have an aliyah and the family a nechama. And to thank Alan and Sue Marowitz for dedicating the daf today in honor of their new granddaughter, Leah Neely, born to their children, Simcha and Mindy Rosenblum. Mazel tov to the Marowitz Mishpacha. And along the Mazel Tov lines, a Mazel Tov to Alan Wiseman on the birth of his grandson in Bnei Brak yesterday. Mazel Tov. Mazel Tov. Well, so with that, let us begin. So we are picking up, today's daf is Peches. Today's daf is Peches 88, but we are actually picking up on Pezayin Amud Aleph, but just the last couple of words. So mamish, the last line of Pezayin Amud Aleph, the last line, last 7 words on the daf. Rav, have a pasik sidra kamei Rabbi. So just remember, the topic that we transitioned to over here a little bit towards the end of yesterday's daf was the nature of tshuva bein adam lechavero. That, again, when I go ahead and I offend someone, I hurt someone, I perpetrate some type of wrong against someone, so there is an obligation to do tshuva, and tshuva comes in the form of asking forgiveness from that individual. So picking up on that theme, Rav, how a pasik sidra kamei de Rebbe. So we'll say Rav was going ahead and reviewing. Pasik sidra literally means, Rashi says, that's Rashi in the daf, sidra, Parshas Mikra, Shanavim or Shal Ksuvim. So Rav was going ahead and teaching or reviewing some particular piece of Torah, whether it was Torah, Nevi'im, Ksuvim, whatever it was, Kamei de Rebbe, in front of Rebbe. Okay, so therefore Rav is giving the shir in the presence of Rebbe. Amud Beis, what happens? Asir Rebbe Chia, Hadul Reisha. So what happened? Rav started the shir. Rebbe Chia walked in a few minutes late. So what happened? Rav went back to the beginning. Okay, whatever. No one should miss the shir. See, some things don't change, by the way. That's right. Some things are just always the same, right? Somebody came a few minutes late to shir. So what happens? I said, fine. We'll go back to the beginning. Look at Rashi. Asra b'chia v'gamhu hayachafes lifsok imo v'chozer b'shvilo l'rosh haparsha. Because Rabbi Chia was also interested in learning the same section together with Rav. Rav had just started a few moments earlier, so I figured, no problem, I'll just go back and start from the beginning again. Okay, so the Gemara says, then what happened? Ayel bar kafra hadl reisha. Bar kafra then walked in a few moments later, and once again Rav said, fine, you know what, let's just go back to the beginning, a little bit of chazara for everyone, not a problem. Asir Reb Shimon Rebbe. Reb Shimon Rebbe then walked into the base medrash. Once again, hadl reisha. Rav went back to the beginning. It's the third time now that Rav has restarted the shir in order to accommodate the latecomers. Asra b'chanina, listen to this. So b'chanina bar Chama comes in. Amar, kuli hayna hadar v'nezel. So Rav says, enough. I'm not going back. So now Rabbi Chanina, fourth individual, walks in. And Rav says, Kuli hai, enough already. Come on, time. What do I have to keep going back to the beginning? See, he decides, he kind of, not loses it, but he says, I'm not going back for Rabbi Chanina. I'm not starting again. So what happened? The Gemara says, so I'm Kuli hai nahadr v'nezel, lo hadr. Therefore, we'll say Rav did not start the shir again. Ikbid Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Chanina was offended. He was, which is really just fascinating. It's just fascinating. In general, it's fascinating to see what people get offended over, right? So Rabbi Chanina, you have to understand something. Rabbi Chanina must have realized that Rav started over because of the previous 3 people. And it's also possible that Rabbi Chanina walked in right after, like a moment after the person before him. So like, at the end of the day, Rabbi Chanina felt it wouldn't have been a big deal. Rav, you already started over. It would not have been a big deal to accommodate me as well. See, he got offended. Which I will say is an interesting idea that sometimes, when we get offended at things, a person has to do a little bit of a self-check. Like, is this really worth getting offended over? And do I really have a right to get offended over this particular thing? Okay, and in any event, Rabbi Chanina gets upset. We'll say, also Rav legabe tleiser mali yomi kippuri v'lo efayis. Rav went to ask Mechila from Rabbi Yochanan for 13 years in a row. 13 Yom Kippurs, 13 Erev Yom Kippurs. Rav went to go ahead and ask Mechila from Rabbi Chanina, and Rabbi Chanina would not be mochel him. So the Gemara says, so we'll say that we're going to see there's two problems with the fact that he went for 13 years. So the Gemara says, how was Rav able to ask Mechila for 13 years? What did we learn yesterday? From Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina, but we learned in yesterday's daf that when you offend someone, you are supposed to ask Mechila, but the cap on asking Mechila is what? Is 3 times. Right, so how is Rav going for 13 years? Let's remember again, we discussed this yesterday. That cap is necessary for 2 reasons. Remember, what were the 2 reasons that it's necessary? Number one, in order that the aggrieved party understands there's an obligation to forgive. There really is. In other words, the same way that there's an obligation to ask Mechila, there's also an obligation to grant Mechila. So the person does not have to keep coming back to you to go ahead and ask Mechila. They ask 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. You can't be an achzer. You also can't be a cruel person and not forgive. Number 2, remember we spoke about yesterday, that at a certain point in time, Chazal needed a person to plug their energies into forward, productive thinking. At the end of the day, I could try my best to go ahead and fix the damage I've done in the past, but I can't spend my entire life doing that. I'll spend some time, I'll spend 3 times, but then I have to devote my energies to moving myself forward. So how is Rav able to go ahead and go for 13 years to ask Mechila? Rav, listen to this. Rav Shiny. Now this is very interesting here. So the Gemara says Rav Shiny. So what does this mean? So this is Machlokes Rashi Rabbeinu Chananel. Rashi says on top, left-hand column, Rav Shiny, Machmer Haya Liatzmo. So Rashi understands that Rav was Machmer. Right? You're right. So we'll say essentially, the way Rav understood the halacha was, you're not obligated to go more than 3 times. Right? You're obligated to ask Mechila, you're not for three times on 3 occasions. You are not obligated to ask for Mechila more than 3 times. Rav was Machmir. So we'll say it's interesting, because you could read the Gemara in 2 ways. Chazal saying, you could only ask 3 times, and after that you have to move on. Or, you're obligated to ask 3 times. More than that, you're not obligated to do. But if you want to keep asking Mechila, keep asking Mechila. Rav was Machmir on himself. And therefore again went for 13 years. But let's say if you look down in the Rabbeinu Chananel is on the bottom left-hand margin. Look at the first line in the Rabbeinu Chananel. If you see it, the end of that first wide line, Aval Tamid Bahadei Rav Shaini Kilomar Rabbi Chanina Rabbo Shal Rav Hava. Oh, what Rabbeinu Chananel says that in fact Rabbi Chanina was Rav's Rebbe. So Rav offended his Rebbe. Oh, when you offend your Rebbe, that's a different discussion. That there's no cap on asking Mechila. So therefore, again, that's why Rav goes 13 years in a row in order to go ahead and ask Mechila, because offending one's Rebbe, that's not subject to the 3-time Mechila cap. That you keep asking until when? Until you get it. So just fascinating machlokes. Just how to interpret those words. Rav Shiny. So ultimately, again, Rashi, Rav refers to Rav himself, saying that Rav was machmir to ask Mechila more than 3 times. Rabbeinu Chananel, no. Rav is not a reference to Rav the personality. It's a relation. It's that saying Rabbi Chanina was Rav's Rebbe. And therefore, again, when offending one's Rebbe, one must go out of their way even more than 3 times to ask Mechila. Incredible. So the Gemara says, okay, so we'll say, so that's Shaila number 1. Shaila number 1 in the story is, how was Rav able to go 13 years? Okay, so Rav Shiny. But there's another kasha. What's the other kasha? Rabbi Chanina, Heichi Avid Hachi. Rabbi Chanina, how do you go ahead and not grant Mechila to someone for 13 years? How do you do that? Right? How do you, Rav is showing up at your house every year for 13 years on Erev Yom Kippur, and he's coming to ask you for Mechila. How do you not grant Mechila? How do you do that? We'll say this is incredible. Rava said, this is such a beautiful Gemara. Kol ma'avir al midosav, ma'avir lo kol peshav. We'll say the best way to secure forgiveness from the Ribono Shel Olam is to be a forgiving person. Best way to secure forgiveness from HaKadosh Baruch Hu is to be a forgiving person. This is, the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, I've quoted this many times in past years. Baal Shem Tov says on the Pasuk in Tehillim, Hashem Tzilcha. So we often translate that as Hashem is your shade. He's your tzel. So the Baal Shem Tov says it actually means that Hashem is your shadow. What happens? What does your shadow do? What does your shadow do? Whatever you do. Whatever you do. So Hashem HaKadosh says that the way the Ribono Shel Olam interacts with us is the way that we interact with others. So if I am a forgiving person, if I'm ma'avir al midosav, ma'avir al midosav means I don't go ahead and hold everyone accountable for every single thing that they do wrong to me. I let things go. So ultimately, if I act that way towards other people, the Ribono Shel Olam acts that way towards me. So how could it be that Rabbi Chanina is not forgiving Rav for 13 years? Isn't there an obligation to be a forgiving person? To which the Gemara says, Ella, this is incredible. Ella Rabbi Chanina, chal machazeh. We'll get ready for this. It's incredible. Rabbi Chanina had a dream. He had a dream. Right? What was his dream? Chazi leil Rav tizakfuhu bedikla. He's in his dream, he saw Rav hanging from a palm tree. Okay, now we'll say, listen to this. And everyone knows, Ugimiri, everyone knows, Dechol dezakfuha bedikla reishahavi. Everyone knows that seeing a person in a dream, if you see someone hanging from a palm tree, that foretells future greatness. Interesting. I was going to say, you would think hanging from a palm tree does not sound good. But the idea of hanging from a palm tree means, I guess metaphorically, that you are above everyone else. So that dream often represented the idea that such a person was going to be elevated to a position of greatness. So I was saying, now watch this. So Rabbi Chanina had a dream that Rav was hanging from a tree, which means that he had a dream that foretold that Rav was going to become Rosh Yeshiva. Beautiful. Only one problem. Look at Rashi. Chalma chazalei Rav ra'a chalom arav shetaluhu b'dekel. He had a dream about Rav that Rav was hanging from the palm tree. V'hu simin nesias rosh gedula, and this is symbolic of the fact that Rav would be elevated to a position of power. What's the problem? Rabbi Chanina Rosh Yeshiva haya. I'll say only one problem. Rabbi Chanina was the Rosh Yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael. He was the Rosh Yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael. So essentially, he had a dream which essentially sounded like what? Rav was going to go ahead and take his job. Now, both sides, now understand, this wasn't an issue about Rabbi Chanina losing his job. This was something much more significant. The Gemara says, Kidam Rabbi b'shas petiras Rabbi Chanina bar Chama yeshev rosh ukishera'a chalom ze'arav da'ug lamaves lefi she'in malchus noga'as b'chaverta. It was when you were appointed Rosh Yeshiva, whether it was Eretz Yisrael or in Bavel, that position was how long? Lifetime position. So Rabbi Chanina has a dream that Rav is being appointed Rosh Yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael. Well, there's only one way for Rav to become Rosh Yeshiva, which is Rabbi Chanina dies. So Rabbi Chanina saw this and he became very scared for his own life. He became very scared that this dream also for, Rav's rise to greatness also represented again Rabbi Chanina's demise. So what did he see? The Gemara says, literally again, one monarchy cannot overlap with another. The rest of the Gemara is even a hair's breadth. So if Rav is going to be Rosh Yeshiva, that must mean that Rabbi Chanina is going to die. So what happens? Amar Listen to this. Rabbi Hanina says, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to remain angry at Rav, and he's going to go ahead and yivrach leBavel. He'll run away to Bavel because, again, he's going to feel so bad that I'm so angry at him. And what's going to happen? B'sham yerosh v'lo nitchin l'mavis b'shvilo. He'll become a Rosh Yeshiva. Let it become a Rosh Yeshiva in Bavel. Let him become a Rosh Yeshiva in Bavel. So I was like, isn't this incredible? This was Rabbi Chanina's reason for remaining. He was willing to be Mochel Rav. He was willing to be Mochel Rav. But because he was scared, literally again, scared over death, that Lamaisa again, Rav was going to become the Rosh Yeshiva, not again, Rashi goes out of his way. This wasn't a din in like Rabbi Chanina losing his job or losing his cover. This was Rabbi Chanina being nervous that ultimately again he was going to lose his life. And therefore again, he goes ahead and he remains angry at Rav. So the Gemara says, so Amar, back to the Gemara, Shmamina, boy leme'avid reshusa, velo efayis. Rav is destined for greatness, therefore I'm not going to forgive him. Let him get out of Eretz Yisrael, let him go to Bavel, he'll go ahead and he'll become Rosh Yeshiva there. Incredible. I will say, I just want to point out that there's so many interesting things that come out from this Gemara. So number one, I will say about how complex people are. Not that we need a Gemara to teach us that, but how complex people are, right? Rabbi Chanina is unforgiving for 13 years. So you would think to yourself, wow, such a chzarius. Even the Gemara is bothered by that. How can you do that? And so he has this whole cheshbon. I will say, this is why in life, to be honest, I think the older we get, the more clear this becomes, how virtually impossible it is to figure people out. Right? Isn't it? You would think like the older you get, the more you understand people. But yet, the older you get, the less you understand people. Because people really are just profoundly enigmatic. Because what makes people tick and why people do things is so often not understandable. Sometimes the people themselves don't understand why they do the things they do. But even if a person has self-awareness, so they understand the things they do, sometimes you think you've got it figured out, but like you pashut can't figure out other people. Rabbi Chanina's got a whole cheshbon over here about, why he's not going to forgive. But Lamaisa, who could have ever imagined that this is what's going on? It's an incredibly important yesod because sometimes people do things and people say things and we get upset and we get angry because we think we understand why they're doing what they're doing. It's important. This is this is the foundation stone in being down like havschus, giving people the benefit of the doubt, or just being mevater, being yielding, being forgiving. It's just to accept the fact I don't really understand anyone. Most of the times I don't even understand myself. That's the honest truth. Let alone actually understand other people. If you could accept that premise that even when they do things that really are upsetting or are offensive, you can say, okay, it's upsetting, it's offensive, but I probably don't understand what it is that's motivating this individual. That's Aleph. Beis is also, it's to me the most fascinating thing from this Gemara is that Rav went and asked Mechila for 13 years. Rabbi Chanina, you came late to Shir. It's the job of the Rebbe to go back to the subject material, to the beginning, every single time some guy, even if Rabbi Chanina comes into Shir, chutzpah, come on time. You're or you'll catch up on your own. You listen to the podcast. You're interested. You're interested in hearing what's in the beginning. Fine. So get there. You don't get there. Who's achrayis? Is that? I will say, if Rav would have come and asked the Shaila, do I have any obligation to ask Mechila? Okay, leaving this side, Rabbi Chanina was his Rebbe. That's an important piece in this. But as well, according to Rabbi Nuchana, according to Rashi, he wasn't his Rebbe. Is there any obligation to ask Mechila in such a situation? And the answer, of course, is no. Now again, it could be the only thing that Rav did wrong is, it appears that Rav got a little bit exasperated because he says, "Coolly, hi, I have to starting over." Okay, maybe he didn't have to say that. Just keep going. We'll say. So many of us have become very adept at avoiding eye contact. So I just pretend like I didn't see you. I really I didn't see you come in this year. A couple of minutes late. Fine, so no problem. We'll go on. But also, you see, there's something amazing also. That sometimes, even if I'm not at fault, it's sometimes worth it to ask Mechila. Sometimes it's worth it to ask forgiveness for one simple reason. Asking forgiveness is free, and there's an inexhaustible supply. And the truth is, it is sometimes so easy to make shalom in life with just an apology. Even if you feel you don't have to. And even if you feel you're in the right. So many times people stand on principle, and there are many unhappy people who stand on principles. And there are many happier people who are willing just to go ahead and swallow their principles and swallow their pride a little bit, ask for forgiveness, apologize, even if you feel you were totally in the right. Because it also says, we all know, and this becomes also true as we get older, that being happy is so much more important than being right. So ultimately, that's what Rabbi is doing over here. Okay, you're upset. I think you're wrong. I think you should have come on time. But if you're offended, I apologize. 13 years? No problem. I'll keep coming back. Incredible Gemara. Let's see, Tanur Rabbanan. We really do have to finish the daf today, though, because tomorrow Sukkah starts. Tanur Rabbanan. Mitzvah Sider Sosei. Now listen to this. Mitzvah Vidui Erev Yomi Kippurim Chashecha. We'll say fascinating Gemara. The mitzvah of vidui, of confession, applies multiple times. I will say now, what I want to point out is something very interesting. Vidui is a chilek of tshuva. Remember again, the Rambam in the beginning of Hilchos Tshuva says, Kisheyase tshuva, when a person will do tshuva, chayiv lehisvados, lefnei hakel baruch hu. The Rambam says, you're chayiv to do vidui. So in the Maimonian construct of tshuva, the first part of tshuva is vidui, is confession, which makes absolute sense. Why? Because, and I will say there are many other parts of tshuva, but if you think about it logically, you can't go ahead and engage in the process of tshuva if what? If you don't acknowledge what I've done wrong. Right? If I don't acknowledge what I've done wrong, it's impossible to engage in the other steps of tshuva. So vidui is not the be-all, end-all of tshuva, but vidui is the gateway. You can't really get the process started without vidui. So the Gemara therefore says, interestingly enough, mitzvah suidi erev yom kippur chashecha. So also we go ahead. The mitzvah of vidui really begins when? On Yom Kippur. At night of Yom Kippur, Kol Nidrei, right? Or Ma'ariv. Right, night of Yom Kippur is when the mitzvah of vidui begins. Aval Amru Chachamim, but Chazal said, Yisvade kodem shiyocha v'yishteh. You really should already begin to recite vidui before you eat your Suda Mafsakes, which we do in Mincha. Right? Really, because most of the thing about this is just a moment. Why am I doing vidui in Mincha? Now, it's a little bit different for us because with slichos, we're already used to doing vidui already again from before Rosh Hashanah. But Lamaisa, what the Gemara is saying is the mitzvah of vidui, the biblical mitzvah to do tshuva, to do vidui, is only when Yom Kippur starts. Chazal said, let's back it up to Erev Yom Kippur, to Mincha. Why? Shemati tarif daito b'suda. Both say, what are we concerned about? Maybe you'll get drunk during your Suda Mafsakes. Isn't this interesting? What we're considering, I was like, can you imagine? Maybe a guy will overindulge a little bit during his Suda Mafsakes, and can you imagine you overindulge so much that you sleep through Kol Nidrei? Now, many people sleep through Kol Nidrei, but they do it in shul. He's talking about someone who goes ahead and overindulges at the Suda and doesn't end up making it. So what happens if a person ends up mamish missing Ma'ariv? So this way, if you end up missing Ma'ariv, at least you got in vidui before Yom Kippur. Now, what I want to point out is the Rambam has a little bit of different girsa. The Rambam says the reason we do vidui ultimately before Mincha is Shema Yichanek, lest one choke chas v'shalom and die during the Suda Hamafsakes. That's a recognition that at the end of the day, these are days of judgment where everything hangs in the balance. So again, but that's the Rambam's girsa. Even though you did vidui by Mincha before you had the Suda, you do vidui again after the Suda as well. Ma'ariv. So I'm going to do a vidui before the Suda, Mincha time, in order if I get a little carried away with the Suda, this way I have the vidui before Mincha. I'm going to do vidui again on Ma'ariv. And we'll say I do that because maybe some type of sinful thing happened during the meal. In other words, maybe even though I did vidui before the Suda, I don't know, maybe I ate without a bracha, maybe I spoke lashon hara, whatever it is. Therefore, my vidui after the meal covers that as well. And even though you did vidui by Ma'ariv, you'll do vidui again by Shachris. Shachris yisvada b'musaf. Even though you did vidui by Shachris, you do vidui by Musaf. B'musaf yisvada b'mincha. So the Gemara says, even though ultimately again you did vidui by Musaf, you'll do vidui again by Mincha. The Gemara says, b'mincha yisvada b'ni'ila. Ultimately again, the Gemara says, Good. Did I skip? No, good. 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 Avabisha is vada arvis yitzvad shachar, shachar yitzvad musaf, musaf yitzvad mincha, b'mincha yitzvad b'neila. Good. So we'll say, so essentially the Gemara says, vidui at every tefillah, starting from mincha on Erev Yom Kippur. Which will say, also if you think about this for just a moment, is such a profound yisod. Right? What is this? Why do I have to do vidui at every single stage? Okay, so the Gemara explains why you need vidui ultimately, again, before the Suda, after the Suda. They will say it's also just an incredible yisod in Shuvah, that a person should never be so confident that they are sin-free. And a person should never be so confident that they are above or beyond any temptation. The idea in Yom Kippur, going ahead and reciting vidui at every interval, really highlights how spiritually fragile we are. And at any given moment, I could always fall prey to sin. The recognition of that fragility is what causes me to live life with a constant awareness. V'hechan amro. But say, where do you say vidui? Yochid achar tfilaso. So an individual says vidui after his davening. Right? We'll say, so we know this. Vidui is said after the technical conclusion of Shmona Esrei. V'shliach tzibor omer be'emtza. And the shliach tzibor ultimately again says this in the middle. Because what it means is in Chazaras Hashatz, vidui is not literally in the middle, but in Chazaras Hashatz. So the Gemara says, my Amar, both says, so what do we say in vidui? Well, what is vidui? Now, really what the Gemara is asking over here is not as much what is vidui, because we have the Ashamnu Baganu, but almost like what is the introductory tefillah associated with vidui? So my Amar Rav, Ata Yodea Raze Olam. So Rav says, we say the paragraph, you know, Ata Yodea Raze Olam, you know the secrets of the world, the Sa'alumo Sisrei Kol Chayim, the hidden thoughts of every single person, which we'll say is what we say today in Shmona Esrei as well. Shmuel says, Me'amke halev. And we'll say, now Rashi says here, Me'amke halev is tfilahi. It's not clear, the Maharsha comments, it's not clear, we must have lost the text to this tefillah, but Rashi knows it's a tefillah, but we don't know what tefillah it is. Levi Amar, Ubisarascha Kasuv Lemor. Levi says, we say, the pasuk, in your Torah it says, Ki ba yom hazeh, Yichapar aleichem l'tar eskem mikol chatosechem l'fnei Hashem titaru. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Ribon ha'olamim. And Rabbi Yochanan says, we say the paragraph Ribon ha'olamim. Rashi says, Kilo atzid kosenu. See, it wasn't Barry Weber who made it up, right? Apparently it was here before him as well. So Lemais again, Ribon ha'olamim, master of the universe. We do not come before you ultimately with our acts of or with our merits, but rather we throw ourselves on your mercy. Rabbi Huda Omer, Ki avonosenu rabba milimnos vechatosenu atzmu misaper. Rabbi Huda says, Ki our sins are too great to count, and our chatoim defy number. Rabbi Hanuna Amar. So we'll say, so again, these are all different tefillahs. We'll say, here we go. Rabbi Hanuna Amar, this is how beautiful. Elokai, my God, before I was created, I was unworthy. Now that I've been created, it's as if I was never created. I am dust in my lifetime. All the more so when I am dead. I stand before you like a utensil, filled with embarrassment and degradation. Which should be your will that I should not sin anymore. What I've sinned already up until now, merok or mechok is our version, right? Go ahead and erase, get rid of, berachamecha, with you. Go get rid of my sins, erase my sins. Avalo al yidei yisurin. But please Hashem, not through suffering. And I will say, this is what we say to this very day. The truth is, we actually say a number of these different tefillos that we build into, but this, I've always found this tefillah of Hamnuna, I don't know why, but to me it's one of the most moving parts of Shmona Esrei. It is just this real and raw conversation with the Ribono Shel Olam. What should I say? I say the same things to you year in and year out. I keep saying I'm sorry. I keep saying I'm going to try again. I keep saying I'm going to do better. And I find myself here once again, another year. I'm so embarrassed. I'm so embarrassed. I know you know I love you. I know you love me. But I'm just embarrassed. I'm embarrassed that I can't get it together. I'm embarrassed that although I should have the ability to go ahead and fix the things that need to get fixed, I'm embarrassed that I just haven't been able to do it. Not because of a lack of resources. I have all the resources in the world. But for some reason, I just, not that I can't, I just haven't done it. Yiratzon shelo echet ha'od, which of course is fascinating. Asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu that I shouldn't sin again. Hakol b'dei shayin chutz yirah. You can't ask God, if I don't want to sin again, it's up to God. Moshe, just love me, just help me, just push me. It's so beautiful. The Gemara says, V'hainu viduya de Rava de kula shasa. Rava would recite this paragraph. This was Rava's vidui throughout the entire year. And Rav Hamnuna Zuta would say it on Yom Kippur. Amar Zutra, lo amar ela de lo amar aval anachnu chatanu. So I will say all of these other tefillos are only necessary if you did not say the phrase aval anachnu chatanu. But we have sinned. However, aval amar aval anachnu chatanu sulot tzarech. I will say if you say the phrase aval, however anachnu chatanu, we have sinned. That's enough also. In other words, the idea that we need in vidui is a recognition that I have sinned. So even that one phrase by itself, aval anachnu chatanu, that's vidui as well. The Amar Bar Hamduri, because Bar Hamduri said there were times that I was standing in front of Shmuel, Shmuel was sitting, and when the Shliach Tzibur get up to the phrase, but we have sinned, kam mekam. Shmuel would get up. Amar Shmamina ikar vidui who. Therefore, you see from me that what that phrase aval anachnu chatanu is the ikar of vidui. Is the ikar of vidui. So what you begin to see is that the real primary part of vidui of confession is just a pure, unadulterated statement of confession. Aval anachnu chatanu. One satisfies their vidui obligation with that phrase as well. Tanan Hasam. So let's go back a little bit. Ultimately, again, there are three different times. There are three different times where Kohanim will duchin 4 times in a day. Which I will say is another way of saying there are 3 different times where Kohanim where Birchas Kohanim will be recited at all of the tefillos of the day. First of all, what does it mean 4 tefillos? What do you have 4 tefillos? The Gemara says b'shachris, b'mosaf, b'mincha, u'b'neilas sha'arim. Right, the regular, right, so you have shachris, mincha, shachris, mosaf, mincha, and neilas sha'arim. Neilas sha'arim is the tefillah of ne'ilah. Now, we're going to see, interestingly enough, that although we only associate the tefillah of ne'ilah with Yom Kippur, but in fact, ne'ilah was sometimes said at other times as well. So Rashi's, okay, let's go right there. So Rashi says, by the way, the fast day they're talking about are fast days for rain. Fast days for rain. So here we go. So the Gemara says, "My ni'ilah sharim." What is that ni'ilah sharim? Now, ni'ilah sharim means the closing of the gates. What does that refer to? Rav Amar Tzalusi Yisirasa. Rav says what it means is an extra tefillah. That ni'ilah sharim refers to an extra tefillah which was said. Why is it called Ne'ilas Sha'arim? I will say, for example, on Yom Kippur, as the sun begins to set, we believe that the gates of Tshuva begin to close. So the tefillah is called Ne'ilah, or Ne'ilas Sha'arim, the close of tefillah that is uttered at the time of the closing of the gates. Ushmuel Amar, Ma'anu Machayenu. Ushmuel says that ultimately, again, it is the phrase, or it is the tefillah of what are we, what are our lives. Meisvei, so the Gemara says, Reizekasha, or Yom Kippurim, Mispalo, Sheva, Misvada, B'Shah. So we'll say, now, look at the Gemara says, or Yom Kippurim, the night of Yom Kippur, Mispalo, Sheva, or Misvada. You say a Shemona Esrei comprised of 7 brachas, and you recite Vidui. B'Shachris, Mispalo, Sheva, Misvada. Shachris, 7 brachas as well, Shemona Esrei, and you say Vidui. B'Musaf, Mispalo, Sheva, Misvada. By Musaf, 7 brachas, and you'd say Vidui. B'Mincha, Mispalo, Sheva, Misvada. Mincha 7 brachas in vidui, u'b'ne'ilah mispalel shiva u'misvada. And ultimately, again, by ne'ilah, you also go ahead and daven Shmona Esrei, 7 brachos, and you do Vidui on Abosai. This seems to support Rav, but it's a kasha on Shmuel. You see from here that what is Ne'ilah? What is Ne'ilah? It's a tefillah. It's a tefillah. It's literally like a supplement, like Rav said, Salusa Yisei Rasa. An extra tefillah, a mamish, a real tefillah like a Shmona Esrei, and not like Shmuel. Both say if you skip the parentheses here from Tanoihi, v'choseim bevidui, and you go ahead and you conclude with vidui divrei b'meir, v'chom seim ispalal sheva, you daven 7 brachos, imrotza lachtom bevidui choseim, and if you want to go ahead and end off with the bracha vidui, both say they had some version of Shmona Esrei where they actually ended off the Shmona Esrei with a bracha on vidui, which of course is a text we don't have. We all say, what's the point of this? The point of this is tiyufta the Shmuel tiyufta. This clearly go ahead and refute Shmuel's point, because we always say, what does this brisa show? It shows that what is Ne'ilah? What is Ne'ilah? A bona fide tefillah. That Ne'ilah is literally another davening. Right? It's put on the same par as Shachris, Musaf, Mincha, and Ne'ilah. That supports Rav and refutes Shmuel. Ula barav nochis kamei de Rabba. Ula barav went before Rabba. Pasach ba'ata bechartanu. V'siyem b'ma anu machayenu. V'shabchei Rav Huna breid Rav Nasan. I'm sorry, v'shabchei. And ultimately, again, he praised him. So he had this version of tefillah, and ultimately, again, he praised him. Rav Huna breid Rav Nasan Amar v'yachid omra achar tefillah. But Rav Huna breid Rav Nasan said, remember, as we said before, that a yachid does not say vidui in the midst of tefillah. Rather, where does the yachid say vidui? At the end of davening, which Shabbos says how our Shmona Esrei and Yom Kippur is structured. We finish primary Shmona Esrei, even Hambarech Esamo Yisrael Shalom, and ultimately, again, then we go ahead and we recite the Vidui. Amarav, Tefillah. I will say, listen to this interesting discussion. Tefillas Ne'ilah Poteres Es Shal Arvis. Listen to this, Shabbos say. Ne'ilah takes care of Mariv, which means that on Yom Kippur, once you daven Ne'ilah, you do not have to daven Mariv afterwards. No. Calm down. Right? So listen to this. So let's listen to this. So let's analyze a little bit. So the Gemara says, Rav Latami, the Amar Tzalusi Yisirasi. So Rav goes according to his reason, because Rav holds that Ne'ilah is a bona fide tefillah. It's a bona fide tefillah. So once it's a bona fide tefillah, it has the ability to take the place of Ma'ariv. And therefore, once you've daven Ne'ilah, you do not have to daven Ma'ariv again. So the Gemara says, but 1 second, did Rav really say this? Ultimately, again, but yet Rav himself said that Ma'ariv is optional. Also, remember again, we go back to brachas. There's a fundamental machlokes about the nature of Ma'ariv in general. Is Ma'ariv an obligatory tefillah? Rav says it is not. They both say Rav says it's optional. So if it's optional, why do I need Ne'ilah to go ahead and satisfy the obligation of Ma'ariv? There is no obligation of Ma'ariv. To which the Gemara says, no, L'divrei Omer Chova Ka'amar. Rav was saying, according to the opinion who holds that Ma'ariv is obligatory, Ne'ilah satisfies the Ma'ariv obligation as well. So the Gemara says, Meisvei, or Yom Kippur, Mispalo, Sheva, Misvada, Shachris, Umisvada, Shachris, Sheva, Misvada, Musaf, Sheva, Misvada. So we'll say, so again, night of Yom Kippur, 7 brachas, Shemona Esrei, and Vidui. Shachris, 7 brachas, Vidui. Musaf, 7 brachas, and Vidui. B'Ne'ilah, Mispalo, Sheva, Misvada. So in Ne'ilah, you go ahead and you say 7 brachas, right? And Vidui. Now listen to this. Arvis, Mispalo Sheva Me'in Shmona Esrei. What do you do for Ma'ariv on Matzah Yom Kippur Abosai? The truncated form of Shmona Esrei known as Havinenu. Which, by the way, is pretty good. There has to be some cheering for that also, right? So again, remember, what's Havinenu? Havinenu is we take the first 3 brachos, the last 3 brachos, and we condense all of the middle brachos into one paragraph. So you see over here that this is interesting. This opinion is saying, no. That Ne'ilah does not satisfy the Ma'ariv obligation. However, there is a truncated form of Ma'ariv. Rabbi China ben Gamliel or Mishum Avosov, no. Mispalo Shmona Esrei Shlemos, not true. There is no truncated Ma'ariv on Matzah Yom Kippur. You have to daven a regular Ma'ariv. Why? Mipnei tap of Peichas. Last daf, we'll say Mesechas Yoma. Because it will say a person has to say Havdalah and Chon Adas. This goes back to brachos as well. The Gemara there discusses that Havinenu is a powerful tool to be used when a person cannot muster up the requisite kavanah. But where does Havinenu, quote unquote, fall short? Fall short is not fair. But where the effectiveness of Havinenu is only where there are no supplemental insertions. Because Havinenu as a construct does not allow for insertions. So you can't do a Havinenu on Ya'levi on Rosh Chodesh because there's nowhere to put the Ya'levi Yavo. You can't do a Havinenu, of course, on Shabbos and for sure also. But Lamaisa, he says you can't do it on Matzah Yom Tov or Matzah Shabbos because there's nowhere to put Havdalah. So ultimately, Rabbi Chanan ben Gamliel says, no, you got to daven a regular Shmona Esrei on Matzah Yom Tov. We'll say, but again, leaving aside whether you could daven a Havinenu or you could have to daven a full Shmona Esrei, what becomes clear? That you have to daven Maariv, right? That becomes clear, which tells us, therefore, that what? That Ne'ilah does not satisfy the obligation of Maariv. To which the Gemara says, Tanaihi. In reality, this is a machlokes Tanoim. Rashi says, Ipatra Ne'ilah shal arvis ilo. It's a machlokes Tanoim. Does Ne'ilah satisfy the Maariv obligation or not? Is a machlokes. And I both say, now here's what's interesting. The way this machlokes manifests itself. Listen to this. The Sanya. Kol chayvei tfilos. Tovlin Kidarka and Yom Kippurim. Both say anyone who is obligated to immerse in a mikvah goes to the mikvah on Yom Kippur. Goes to Yom Kippur. For example, Nida Yoledes Tovlos Kidarka Medele Yom Kippurim. For example, a woman who's a Nida or a Yoledes, right? The woman who gave birth and now it's time for her to immerse. All these women, they go to the mikvah on the night of Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur night. I will say, we don't pass in this way, but just so you understand, the logic over here is, although there is an Isser Rechitza, there is an Isser, a prohibition of bathing on Yom Kippur. It's one of the Inuyim, Halacha L'maisa, we'll call it ritual immersion. Tefillah mikvah is not considered to be Rechitza. That's not part of the Isser. Therefore, again, if you're obligated to go to the mikvah, you go to the mikvah. Bal Kari, what happens if a man has a seminal emission? Tova v'holich ad hamincha. He also goes to the. This is Takanas Ezra, right? This is the Dirabanan. Takanas Ezra was that if a man has a seminal emission, he should go to the mikvah before going ahead and learning Torah or davening. So what happens if a person has a seminal emission on Yom Kippur? He goes to the mikvah on Yom Kippur only up until mincha time. Up until mincha time. Meaning if the seminal emission happens after mincha time, he doesn't go on Yom Kippur, rather he just goes at night. Now we'll say, what is it? Rabbi Yossi Omer Kol Yom Kulo. Rabbi Yossi says, no, he could go to the mikvah the entire day. Now what's the pshat? What's happening over here? Take a look at Rashi. This is really quite interesting. Tova v'holich ala mincha. It's the first short line in Rashi. Im iralo kari kodem lachein tovel. Kedesh yuchal ispal tfilas at mincha. So we'll say, so if a man has a seminal emission on Yom Kippur, up until mincha time, he goes to the mikvah. That way he could daven the tefillos of the day. Shachris, Musaf, Mincha. However, aval ra'a kari min mincha l'mayla ein mutar litbol. But if he had a seminal emission after mincha time, he can't go to the mikvah on Yom Kippur. Eli yamtin ad shetachshach v'yitbol. But rather, what should he do? Wait until nightfall. Wait until Matzah Yom Kippur, then go to the mikvah then. I will say now why. This sfira leil rabbanan the tfilas ni'ila balayla. So we'll say, this is incredible. See, I know what you're thinking to yourself, but one second. You're allowing him to go to the mikvah up until mincha time, so you could daven shachris, or really arvis, Maariv the night before, shachris, musaf, mincha. What about ne'ilah? Right? Technically speaking, if he had a seminal mission and go to the mikvah, he can't daven ne'ilah. The Rabbanan hold that ne'ilah is davened at night. So we'll say, so therefore, what are they going to tell this guy? Wait till nightfall, then what? Go to the mikvah, and then what? And then daven ne'ilah. Now I will say, the way the Gemara understands this, therefore, is that what? Is that halacha l'maisa, well, if ne'ilah is davened at night, then ne'ilah satisfies the obligation of Maariv as well. So according to this opinion, that would tell a Baal Keri, wait until nightfall, you'll daven Ne'ilah at nightfall. If Ne'ilah is being davened at nightfall, it certainly goes ahead and takes care of the obligation for Maariv as well. Continuing that Rashi, Vadik Tani Einapo Teres, Rabbi Yossi, Da Amar Kalayom Mutter litba v'afilu ra keri la'achar tilas amincha tovel bayom kedei l'spal tilas nila. Alma kaser tilas nila ein zman balayla. U'l'dei nebater. Supposed to listen to this. Rabbi Yossi, on the other hand, who holds that a Baal Keri could go to the mikvah the entire day, even after mincha time, holds that when do you daven ne'ilah? before nightfall. Before nightfall, you daven Ne'ilah, and therefore we want the Baal Keri to be able to go ahead and daven Ne'ilah. Now, if Ne'ilah is being davened before nightfall, we'll say, then what? Then it will not satisfy the obligation of Ma'ariv. So the Gemara is suggesting, this is really quite fascinating, that the machlokes over here about the ability for a Baal Keri to immerse after mincha time, the Rabbanan say he can't, he's got to wait till nightfall. That's because they hold Ne'ilah is not until nightfall. Well, if that's the case, according to the Rabbanan, Ne'ilah will satisfy the obligation of Ma'ariv. Rabbi Yossi holds that a Baal Keri could go ahead and immerse in the mikveh even after mincha time. They hold Ne'ilah is davened by day, or at least end of the day, and therefore Ne'ilah does not satisfy the criteria for Ma'ariv. Incredible. So the Gemara says, Urminhu, ask a kasha, Hazav v'amitzar v'mitzaras, ubal nidit hamimes, tovlin kidar k'miyam kippurim. You know what we learned as follows. The Brisa says like this, the Zava, mitzora, mitzaras, Boel Nida is a man who had relations with a Nida, and therefore again, if a person does that, he becomes Tameh. He essentially contracts the Tumas Nida. Again, this is nothing that happened in Yom Kippur per se, but again, if let's say he didn't immerse for it before Yom Kippur, V'tameh Meis, or a person Chas Shalom who's Tameh Meis, Tovlin Kidar K'Yom Kippurim. They go to the mikvah in a regular fashion on Yom Kippur. In other words, Rabbi say that if there's man Tvila falls out on Yom Kippur, they go to the mikvah. Nida, Violedes, Tovlos, Kidar K'Yom Kippurim. A Nida and a Yoledes, they go to the mikvah. Now their time for going to the mikvah is at night. So if the night for their Tvila falls out on the night of Yom Kippur, they go to the mikvah. So the Gemara, Tovlos, Kidar K'Yom Kippurim. Baal Keri. What about a Baal Keri? Telva v'holich kol yom kulo. He goes to the mikvah the entire day. He can go to the mikvah anytime the entire day of Yom Kippur. Rabbi Yossi Omer, mina mincha ulamayla eino yachol litbol. Rabbi Yossi says that from mincha time and on Yom Kippur, the Baal Keri cannot go ahead and go to the mikvah. Now you see the obvious contradiction. Right, what's going on over here? Beforehand, Rabbi Yossi held that what? That the Baal Keri could go the entire day. The Rabbanan held he could only go up until mincha time. So what's going on over here? To which the Gemara says, Lo kasha, ha ditzali tfilas ne'ilah, ha delot sali. We'll say it's not a contradiction. One is a situation where he already davened ne'ilah. One is a situation where he didn't daven ne'ilah. If you already look at Rashi for just a moment, ditzali tfilas ne'ilah, biyom kodum shira kari, v'hada amram le'el. We'll say, so very simply, if he already davened ne'ilah and then had the seminal mission, then what? Wait till nightfall to go to the mikvah. But if he did not yet daven ne'ilah and had the seminal emission, go to the mikvah so you could daven ne'ilah. The Gemara says, 1 second. Idit sali. But if he already davened ne'ilah, why would the Rabbanan allow him to go to the mikvah on Yom Kippur? The only reason to allow for the Baal Keri to go to the mikvah is why? So that he would have the ability to go ahead and daven. But if he's already davened, then why would there be a license for him to go to the mikvah? To which the Gemara says, Kasabi Rabbanon Tvila Bizmana Mitzvah. But said it's very interesting because the Rabbanon hold that ultimately, again, going to the mikvah in the first immediate time is a mitzvah. This is called Tvila Bizmana Mitzvah. This is a whole discussion, even contemporarily. With, let's say, again, because for us, immersion in the mikvah usually sounds like Hilchos Nida. So let's say the time for a woman's immersion comes out on Shabbos night, Friday night. Is a woman allowed to go to the mikvah on Friday night, or should she push it to Motzei Shabbos? Because remember, there are issues involved in going to the mikvah on Shabbos. So that's a machlokas with Tvila Bizmana Mitzvah, or Allah Mitzvah. If you hold that going to the mikvah at the first available time is the mitzvah, then yes, you do that even on Shabbos. But if you hold that it's not a mitzvah, push it to Motzei Shabbos. So the Rabbanan hold that Tefillah Bizman is a mitzvah. Right? Going to the mikvah at the first available time is in fact a mitzvah, and therefore halacha l'maisa, the Baal Keri should do so even on Yom Kippur. Now I will say what I just want to point out. Well, let's finish. Michal Rabbi Yossi Savar Lav Mitzvah. So I will say it sounds like Rabbi Yossi holds that Tefillah Bizman is not a mitzvah. That Rabbi Yossi holds that there's no obligation to go to the mikvah at the first available time. So the Gemara says, really, is that so? Vatanya, we learned, this is a great case. Hare Shaya Kasav Albis Shem. Hare Shaya Shem Kasav Albis Saro. We'll say, let's say a person wrote the Shem Hashem on their flesh. Interesting case. I wrote the Shem Hashem, right? Yud K Vav K on my hand. And what happens? We'll say it poses an incredible problem. Why? Hare ze lo yirchatz velo ya'amol b'makom hatinofes. We'll say it's a problem, right? The problem is you can't wash, right? Because if you wash, what could happen? You could end up erasing the name, right? You also can't go ahead and stand in an unclean place with that name exposed, because then you are bringing the Shem Hashem into an unclean place. Nizdamne lo tfilos mitzvah. What happens if you have to go to the mikvah, an obligatory immersion? So what do? Korech alav gemi. You tie a reed on top of the name, so you cover up the name. But I will say, but a reed is porous, so it allows water to get in. The yored v'tovel, and you go to the mikvah. Rabbi Yossi says, no, yored v'tovel kidarko. If you have an obligation to go to the mikvah, you could go to the mikvah in a regular fashion. You don't have to cover up the name. And if as long as you don't scrub off the name. And I will say, why does Rabbi Yossi allow that? If it came alone, b'tfila bismana mitzvah pligi. And I will say, it turns out that what are they arguing about? Whether or not tefillah b'zmana is a mitzvah. The Rabbanan hold that tefillah b'zmana is not a mitzvah, and therefore, again, even though you have an obligatory immersion, you still must take steps in order to go ahead and safeguard the name of Hashem. Rabbi Yossi holds tefillah b'zmana is a mitzvah, and because it is a mitzvah, since you not only have a license but an obligation to go to the mikvah, there is no obligation to go ahead and safeguard the name of God. If it goes in and becomes erased, then what? It becomes erased. Since you are engaged in the performance of a mitzvah, it would be permitted. So I will say, see from here that Rabbi Yossi holds that tefillah b'zmana is a mitzvah. Is a mitzvah. You just said before Rabbi Yossi holds that tefillah b'zmana is not a mitzvah. To which the Gemara says, Ahi, Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda, two different Rabbi Yossis. So I will say there's Rabbi Yossi and there's Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda. The Sanya, Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda, Omer, Daya Latvila Sheteheba Achrona. We'll say this is a more complicated case, which we're not going to get into now. Rashi pointed out over here, they are talking about a case over here of a woman who was pregnant, comes back after having had a baby, or really most probably miscarrying, but she's not sure about the mitzias of what happened. She's not sure when she miscarried. She's not sure if it was a boy, if it was a girl. So we have issues when it comes to Tum and Tara to try to figure out how long is she tameh for? When could she go to the mikvah? So the Gemara goes through a whole number of different scenarios. Rabbi Yossi, the Gemara says, Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda says, Dayi l'tfila shetei b'achrona. He holds ultimately again that just go to the mikvah at the latest possible time, which indicates that he holds that tefillah b'zmana is not a mitzvah. So Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda holds tefillah b'zmana is not a mitzvah, and ultimately again Rabbi Yossi holds that tefillah b'zmana is a mitzvah. Look at Rashi just a moment. Hahi. Rashi says, Darmina le'el Rabbi Yossi omer min amincha l'mayla l'yitba shetech shach the tefillah b'zman alav mitzvah. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. Good. Two different Rabbi Yossis, the Gemara says. Good. So I just want to point out, by the way, so in general, the halacha is that we don't immerse on Yom Kippur, right? Even though, again, we hold tefillah bizmana is a mitzvah. That's how we paskin halacha l'maisa. That's why a woman will go to the mikvah on Shabbos. Woman will go to the mikvah on Yom Tiv, but in Yom Kippur, ultimately, again, we do not do tefillah, because we do include tefillah in the mikvah as part of the Isser of Rechitza. Incredible. So the Gemara says as follows. We'll say, now, interestingly enough, this is really a very interesting way that the Masechta ends. Once the Gemara kind of had the discussion of going ahead and being tovel, immersing for a seminal emission, the Gemara raises this discussion. Haroa kereb Yom Kippurim. What happens if a person has a seminal emission on Yom Kippur? Yored v'tovel, goes to the mikvah, ula erev yishav sheif. And in the evening, now I will say yishav sheif means literally again, he should remove chatzitzos. Right? Yishav sheif means to scrub. But what it really means is to remove any interpositions. To make sure that when he goes to the mikvah, there's nothing intervening between his flesh and the water. So the Gemara says, La erev, mai dehava hava. It doesn't make sense. You just said if a man has a son, he should go to the mikvah, but that night sounds like what? Matzah Yom Kippur, he should go ahead and clean himself and make sure he has no chatzitzos. But already at night, he's already gone to the mikvah. Ela ima mi ba'erev yishav sheif. I'll say, interesting enough, what it means is, on Erev Yom Kippur, when a man is cleaning himself, he should make sure that his body is chatzitza free. So in the event that he has a seminal emission on Yom Kippur, he's able to go to the mikvah and the tefillah will be totally kosher on Yom Kippur. Interesting enough. So Tani Kami Rav Nachman. Haroa Kereb Yom Kippurim. But say in general, the Gemara says, let's talk about hashkafically. What happens if a man has a seminal emission on Yom Kippur? Like what is that? What's the message there? Haroa Kereb Yom Kippurim. Avonosav mechulin lo. This is so interesting. If a man has a seminal emission on Yom Kippur, that is a sign that his sins are forgiven. His sins are forgiven. Rashi says over here, first wide line, we're obviously talking about a case where it was not with kavanah. In other words, that we'll say if a man was having impure thoughts and as a result had seminal emission, okay, then we understand why that happened. He's talking about a situation where it happened shelo b'miskavin. A man has a seminal emission, but again, not induced. The Gemara says. So what is that? What does that show? Like what do you do with that? So the Gemara says, Avonosav mechulin. Rashi says, Simin tov huzeh yira zera v'yarich yamim. We'll say in that case, the zera represents vitality and longevity, and therefore that is a simin that ultimately, again, he's going to have a good year and ultimately see offspring. So Gemara says, really? V'hatanya, we learned, Avonosav sidurin. But yet another brisa says that if a man has a seminal emission on Yom Kippur, it's bad news. It's bad news. It means his averos are arranged to be judged. To which the Gemara says, no, avonot, my sidurin limachal. It means, what does it mean? They're arranged. They're arranged to be forgiven. Interesting. Tanar Diberi Bishmal. Haroa Kereb Yom Kippurim. Yidag Kol Hashana Kula. If a man has a seminal emission Yom Kippur, he should worry the entire year. Why should he worry? Look at Rashi. Yidak, first wide line. Yidak Kol Hashana Kula. Shemalo Kiblu Ta'aniso. V'esbio b'masha b'yadam la'asbio. Ke'eved ha'muzakos. They will say, listen to this. You have to be nervous. What do you have to be scared about? They will say that maybe ultimately, again, since he had this emission, there's a certain level of satisfaction that he has, which means that he doesn't have inui, he doesn't have affliction in one particular area, right? One of the inuyim is abstaining from relations. Well, he doesn't have that inui, that need has been satisfied. So the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu denied him that inui could be that HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want his tshuva. So the Gemara says, "V'im also lo shana," but if he lives out that year, muftach lo shehu ben olam haba. That shows that such a person is truly a ben olam haba. Amrav Nachman bar Yitzchak Teda. I will say, how does it show that? I will say, it's interesting. So, on one hand, if it happens, you have to worry about what that means. But if you live through the year, that shows, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu really loves you, and you're a ben olam haba. Why? Why does that show that? To which the Gemara says, Amrav Nachman bar Yitzchak Teda, Shakala olam kula ra'iv v'hu saveya. Ultimately, again, because we'll say, what happens if a man has that emission Yom Kippur? So to speak, the entire world is hungry. The entire world is hungry. In other words, denied that particular pleasure. V'hu saveya. But he is sated. Right? He is sated ultimately again through that emission, to which the Gemara says, look at Rashi for just a moment. Teda shekal olam ra'iv mitashmish. V'hu saveya v'lonis ana bezos shalomidaito ishbiu v'afal pikein also fine. So the Gemara says, ki asa Rav Dimi Amar, when Rav Dimi came along, he said, Mafish chaye sagi umaski. So Rav again echoes this. Rav Dimi echoes this sentiment. He says, "Mafish chayi." Rashi says, "Zeh shara keri b'yom kippurim." Someone who becomes about keri, someone who has this emission on Yom Kippur. So literally, "Mafish chayi" means he will have much life. Sagi umaski. Rashi says, "Bebanim ubebnei banim shekacha simin yira zera yarich yamim." So ultimately, again, Rav Dimi says that a person has this emission on Yom Kippur that symbolizes the idea that a person is going to have offspring and vitality. I will say, it is interesting, ultimately, again, how the Masechta ends. No, quite an interesting ending. And I will say, so what's the pshat? Why does the Masechta end this way? So we'll say, understand at the end of the day, I think what Chazal trying to teach us is as follows, right? What does Zera represent? Zera represents life itself. Zera represents really the koach, the vigor, and the vitality of man. We'll say, what is it that we daven for on Yom Kippur? Right? So when we daven for life, when we say Zachrenu l'chayim, melech chafetz b'chayim, v'kasvena b'sefer hachayim, what are we asking for life for? Life is not an ends. Life is not an ends. Life is a means to do something of significance, to do something with my vitality, to do something with my vigor. So haroa keri b'yom kippur, a person has this mission in Kippur, that vitality is there. What does that mean? I have it. It means I possess it. I possess it. The shayla is, what am I going to do with it? So the Masechta Dafka ends off with this, because Shabbos said at the end of the day, if we're going to ask for life from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if we're going to say Chazreinu, then Chasmeinu, because we just finished with Ne'ilah, B'Sefer HaChaim, I have to be able to answer one simple question. If I get it, what am I going to do with it? Because I will say, this is the part often of tshuva where I think we kind of drop the ball, which is we know what to ask for, but we don't always have a plan what we're going to do with it. Right? We'll say, think about this just a moment. Chodesh Baruch Hu granted our tefillos. He gave us life. We're here. Right? We're here. It's almost Rosh Chodesh Av. Baruch Hashem. Chodesh Baruch Hu gave us another year. Another year. How many of us have actually done something dramatically significant with it? And how many of us have actually fully planned it that's materialized? Meaning, how many of us have actually approached the year and said, okay, here's my plan for the year. Here's what I'm doing. Here's what I'm going to Schatani Maskir. I haven't done it. And because it's just the nature of the human condition, we just get busy. So the Gemara Dafka ends off with the Sugi of Keri. Because the Sugi of Keri says, do you know what each of us possesses? All right, besides Keri. What each of us possesses, ultimately, again, is vigor and vitality. And the shayla is, if I get another year of life, not if, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives me another year of life, what am I ready to do with it? We'll say that's the avodah of Yom Kippur. Not just to do tshuva, and not just to abi HaKadosh Baruch Hu for another year of chayim, but to come into Yom Kippur with a clear and comprehensive plan. That if I get that year of life, when I get that year of life, here's what I'm going to do with it. We'll say, Hadron Allah Yom Kippurim. Mazel Tov, I'll say Mazel Tov. It's been an incredible and overwhelming and beautiful and healing journey. And in Meretz Hashem tomorrow, B'Shah Tova U'Mitzlachos, we begin Meseches Sukkah. Mazel Tov.